Hey, Jeremy.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good.
What are you doing nowadays?
Nowadays, I do a lot of consulting, but when I was a teacher, I would say that I started when I was 18. I lived in Japan for a year, right out of high school, between high school and college, and ended up getting a job at the American school in Japan teaching elementary school swimming in an indoor Olympic sized swimming pool. And I had no inclination prior to then that I would ever be interested in working with young children. These were kids between 5 and 12, elementary school students. And I loved it. And today we're talking about social emotional learning. That was really my entree into being a teacher, was realizing that all the skills I had to teach swimming were secondary to my emotional connection with the child, and how we socialize the experience to reduce anxieties. So, but in the career span of 25 years, I've taught on the Tohono O'odham Reservation. I developed 5 charter schools around the state of Arizona, both as a teacher, a principal, and eventually as an assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction, and eventually became an instructional coach, technology integration coach, and then the coordinator of education technology for Tucson Unified School District. And I've been, for the last few years, I retired, and I've been doing education consulting since then.
I feel like some of your earlier experiences are pretty in line with some of mine. I mean, I also went and taught abroad, but not in Japan. But my beginnings, I'm originally from New York. And so, living in the city, I started with basic education. So adult basic education for, adults that really have low literacy levels, and also GED. And that kind of led into teaching ESL, and then got my master's degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And I was just thinking that, the connection to social emotional learning, it's funny to talk about it out loud as a something, because I feel like for particularly, and maybe this is in your case too, I came into, English as a second language or English language learners kind of before it was cool, or no, before like everyone had to have a degree in that, or at least have some extension of their certificate in order to teach it. And
Right.
SEL is just kind of at the core of it. As you're teaching that language for the students, you're also teaching them how to behave, how to, interact with each other, which is outside of like the academic language. And the academic language needs to be taught, but it's going to come through the content areas. But they're not going to get that social connection with each other unless it's really taught. So it's just interesting to think about. And I think thinking about SEL in that way, and not sure, does that connect at all to your work in Japan? Or
How we approach social emotional learning today is to say, okay, here's a curriculum piece or an instructional model. We need to now train you on it and plug it into what you're doing. And I've been thinking, wow, that maybe the conversation needs to start with, don't you already do some kind of
right,
social emotional
right,
learning anyway? And the only question is, to what extent? Is it
right,
transparent? Do you have communication strategies that are effective for
right,
doing that well? And how capable are you as a teacher to drill down enough into understanding something about each individual student so that you can facilitate those social interactions, and how well you can read your child's emotional state?
right. Putting it in that perspective, just saying, yeah, it's definitely things that we've always been doing, and it's kind of inorganic to say, okay, well, it's like a curriculum, right? Well, here's your curriculum and how to do it now. It's really like, and best practices, but best practices like not based off of evaluations and assessments, but best practices off of like what has really worked empathetically with my students, like how have I really created that trust, seeing those behavior patterns. How come I see it and you don't? Like, what are we doing differently? And now we call it SEL, right?
Teachers essentially function in a state of private practice, right? They go into a classroom, they close
Sure.
the door.
Absolutely.
These are their kids. And so your window onto their practice is extremely limited,
Yes.
right? But unless a transformation of a school culture happens from the top down. Like we're prioritizing.
Sure.
If you don't make relationships with your students an essential component of all the instruction that follows, then we have a problem. Tell me more about that for you as a classroom teacher. When you're, let's just take the first week of school. Like what kinds of things do you do to ensure that you're forging those connections and that students have regard for you and they have regard for others? What does that look like for you?
It definitely isn't academics, right? I even asked my daughter the other day, or 2 weeks back in, and I'm like, "Oh, do you have any homework yet?" But reflecting, it's like, no, wait, there's this building, right? There's this building of relationships and this trust. Talking about security, like what is okay with us standards wise in our classroom, like calling them the rules, right? What are those consequences or ways that we shouldn't behave? How do we respect each other? Just really, I think, drilling into learning about each other.
The social emotional piece about the home school connection is really also about forging relationships with families.
Right.
But you couldn't go through this last year without having teachers have to really rethink, in many cases, the degree to which they're having those learning focused conversations with parents. Because now the parent is the co-teacher.
Right.
I'm not in private practice anymore. You're actually in my classroom. I'm in your bedroom. We're doing
Yes.
that together now, right? Talk about how you think classroom practice can benefit from a more conscientious or structured approach to SEL.
I mean, think about like that. It made me think. I have a daughter and a son, and when something goes wrong, I can't pull my daughter aside and be like, let's have a conversation on the side because I don't want my son to hear, right? And even talking about the COVID slide, it's like first time I think parents were able to see into the classroom exactly what you're saying, like no longer private, but more like, oh, wait a minute, now I actually get to see what's going on, whereas you usually see me once or twice a year. Being with students at home, I think it kind of gave a different perspective of, oh, I can make an impact here because I'm seeing what you're doing kind of day to day.
It's so counterintuitive to describe something that's digital as being human, as reinforcing social emotional attributes, right? But in terms of digital tools used for students and providing homeschool connections and the transparency of ongoing data collection, right, helps facilitate those kinds of sometimes uncomfortable conversations about things that need to be talked about. But they can happen more often, more regularly, more routinely. So when you ask about, well, what about going back to the classroom? Well, first of all, don't leave that piece out. Make sure that within your classroom, you're using your interactive whiteboard, that you're calling students up to drive the instruction. Do we have recommendations for how they address this besides if you have digital tools and digital opportunities, you can actually still do some screen time. You can actually see their faces. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe keep some of those hybrid tools you're using so that you can still do that at home.
Also as a parent, I've been thinking the same thing as, additionally, there are some cases that are still coming up and, what happens when students need to go home, maybe stay home for a while. And a lot of the mitigation programs, say you need to go home, but what I haven't seen and I'm like, I can't be a novel idea is, can we transition into remote?
We also got survey information that taught us a lesson, which was there are students who benefited from this. And oftentimes the ones who benefited, I think, were the ones who were students who were otherwise shy in their classroom, may not have felt socially, emotionally connected with their peers in their learning environments, right? Did not do well with the daily structure or the demand of task time and seat time and so on. So let me put it this way. There are advantages and disadvantages to everything.
Absolutely.
What specific things have you found really work in that regard to help a child realize that whether they're challenged by their literacy acquisition or they're on par but don't believe it? How do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think also allowing them to be who they are is important. Working with them one on one, allowing them to make mistakes in a safe space, with a teacher, or in a very small group. Bringing others that are at the same level could also work, so that they're not feeling like they're bombarded with other students that they may view as being better, or that they may view as the kid that always talks in the class. They have this space to take it slower, to take their time, and coming to them in a space of differentiation. Just some examples. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I first of all, thank you for using the word differentiation. I think it's the first time today we use that.
Yeah.
Um, Boy, you can't really have these conversations without a differentiation understanding and an understanding of scope and sequence and scaffolding, right?
Right.
And that's where, so one of the things you said earlier about like, oh, social emotional learning is what we've always done. It's embedded within when we do academic practice, right? Now we're wanting to expose that or lift it up in our consciousness
Right.
as a paradigm or framework to do those things. It starts with differentiation.
Bringing in the SEL curriculum to me really level sets. It is, because you mentioned something about, like, I'm assuming if I've got it, you've got it, and my neighbor teachers also have it, or the ones above and the ones below, so that when the kids came to me, I know that I'm building off of what they learned before, and I'm going to go send them to another place. But to your point about it not necessarily being there, that embracing that curriculum, despite it being kind of like another thing you have to teach to, it is really like a baseline and a standard of ensuring that we are all aware that there are different techniques, there are different strategies, there are different practices that can and should be used, and they are aligned to supporting students in different ways.
So it's not just the explicitness, it's not just transparency, but it's establishing a value and a culture that says if you're going to achieve equity, you have to have conversations that expose and reveal these dynamics in
Right.
in intra and interpersonal relationships.